Welcome back. Thank you for joining us again. Honorable Minister, please give us an update on the bill to amend the Prison Act, which is said to have passed through the second reading at the National Assembly, and how the bill, when passed, will ease the challenges of congestion in Nigerian prisons.
The bill for an act to amend the 1963 Prison Act, as you have rightly indicated, has passed the second reading, and it is our hope that very, very soon, with the active support of the National Assembly, that this bill is going to be passed. Much of the problems that we have today actually has to do with established procedures. And the Prison Act of 1963 prescribes a series of offenses and punishments that are no longer in tandem with modernity.
Like?
That are no longer in tandem with the sophistication of crimes in our country now. For instance, the 1963 Act, for instance, prescribes a series of punishments for a series of crimes on the understanding that when committed, proper and quicker adjudication by the judiciary will either exonerate or convict the prisoner without any provision for any alternative punishments outside custody. And because crimes are committed irregularly all the time without any defined pattern, the number of prisons that we have vis-a-vis the number of prisoners that we have do not correspond. And because the law does not provide for alternative punishment, people are necessarily incarcerated and put in our prisons. And because the judicial process is a little sluggish, given to also the challenges that the judiciary also faces, ranging from number of judges and number of courts and the rest of them, the prison system is compelled to hold in custody people who have been remanded in custody. Ordinarily, and this is part of the innovation or reformation that is embedded in the amendment that is in the works, there should be alternative punishments to custody. For instance, provision for suspended sentences. For instance, provision for release of persons for community service. For instance, where a person has committed an offense that ordinarily will say attract a punishment of 1 year custody in the prisons, and the person in the process of facing trial has spent 2 or 3 years in prison, there should be an alternative punishment, for instance, of, say, handing over to community leaders or traditional rulers for observation that will ease the congestion in our prisons. All these are not embedded in the 1963 Act. All these are also proposals that we contemplate in the amendment that we are seeking now, in the hope that when that is done, the number of persons that ordinarily are in the prisons will reduce. If you take that into proper perspective, against the backdrop of the fact that as of today, we have over 70% of the 54,000 persons that are in prison awaiting trial, you realize that
70%.
Yeah, you realize that we have just under 30% of convicts in the prison. You realize that we have under 15,000 of the 50-something thousand that are in the prison as convicted prisoners. If we have that as people who ordinarily that should be in prison, then certainly the challenges that we are facing in the prisons today will abate. And so it is our hope, in combination with the interministerial committee that Mr. President approved, that is in place now, to suggest alternative punishments to prison inmates, then of course the problem of prison congestion will be a thing of...
And talking about convicts, from the reports that we get, the Nigerian Prison Service is still struggling with its goal of inmate reform, what are the challenges?
Well, the challenges that we face in that direction of prison reformation or reformation of inmates is, of course, the general challenge of lack of infrastructures. For every of the prisons, it is expected for them and the inmates to be properly reformed, for the inmates to get properly rehabilitated towards a comprehensive reintegration into the larger society. Facilities must be available. Facilities such as vocational skill centers, facilities such as schools within the prisons, and the general infrastructure that will create an enabling environment for teaching and learning. As of today, in some of our prisons, we have vocational training centers, we have skill acquisition centers where prisoners learn crafts, where prisoners learn some vocations in carpentry, tailoring, soap making, and others. And because of the openness of our educational system, we equally have facilities in some of our prisons for the training of inmates. And I can tell you today that a sizable number of our inmates who went to the prisons illiterate have acquired certificates, first school leaving certificates, GC and WAEC certificates, and about 50 of members of the prison system are undertaking courses in the Nigerian Open University system. And some of them are at the verge of graduating. But of course, that leaves us with greater room for improvement, because looking at what we have in our prisons today, these facilities are not commensurate with the number of persons that we have in the prison that are desirous of learning. And of course, given the mandatory requirement of the prison system as a reformation correctional center, it becomes imperative that the prison system must accommodate that basic requirement of ensuring that when these people leave the prison, they are better equipped in terms of skills and knowledge to be able to fit into the larger society.
I recently spoke with the former chief of the naval staff, and he condemned the decision to arm the Nigeria Security and Civil Defense Commission, describing it as a continued militarization of Nigeria. That decision has been taken, there's no going back on it, but how do you justify that action?
The Nigerian Security and Civil Defense Corps is charged with the responsibility of protecting the vandalism of critical national assets, including our oil pipelines and our electricity cable lines. In recent times, given the challenges of insecurity that Nigeria faces today, the Nigerian Security and Civil Defense Corps is involved in the joint task forces and committees responsible for ending insurgency in the country. The Nigerian Security and Civil Defense Corps engages in activities that go beyond mere quelling of civil disturbances. And so if you imagine the sophistication with which oil theft is carried out in Nigeria today, if you also imagine the desperation of Nigerians that steal our electricity cables and oil pipelines and blow them up for the purpose of bunkering our oil, and you imagine that the core mandate of stopping these activities rests squarely on the shoulders of the Nigerian Security and Civil Defense Corps, then you will find justification in the need to arm a segment of the Nigerian Security and Civil Defense Corps for the purpose of not just protecting the larger society and its critical infrastructures, but protecting themselves, because to do otherwise is unnecessarily putting other Nigerians in the harm's way without giving them the necessary wherewithal to protect themselves, even in the course of protecting other Nigerians and our critical infrastructures. And so I think that it is not correct to assume that you can send a soldier to the war front to go and confront enemies with sophisticated weapons, with bare hands. And that is exactly the transformation, the metamorphosis that has taken place in the Nigerian Security and Civil Defense Corps against the reality that the responsibility that they have to carry out is risky, and that the people that they have to confront are also equipped with sophisticated weapons.
Comrade Abba Moro, thank you for your time.
Thank you very much for having me.
And we thank you for watching. Please join us again next week when View from the Top returns. Between now and then, let's continue the conversation online at channelstv.com. Let me know what you think of my conversation with the Honorable Minister of Interior and my other guests. I thank you again, and I wish you a good day.